Hang on.
That's up cool. Oh wait, try again.
How about now? Is that better?
Yeah, so nice.
But it wouldn't be so if something didn't go slightly astray.
Yeah. Great. Okay, over to you. Thank you.
Awesome. I'll just start again so that everyone can hear me. Kia ora tātou. Thank you all so much for having me today at the 2022 Apa Hui. I'm really stoked to be presenting, and thank you for your patience with the Zoom presentation. I am presenting from Wanaka today and unfortunately couldn't make it up in person. So yeah, my name is Kelli Gerritsen. I am a volunteer with Litter Intelligence. Last year I completed the Bachelor of Environmental Management at the Southern Institute of Technology. To fulfill the degree requirements, I completed a year-long project into an environmental problem in the Southland region. So I became involved with Litter Intelligence in 2020 during the lockdown. And throughout the course of my degree, I contributed to local litter surveys. I became a lead litter data collector and led surveys, and also taught other students at SIT how to undertake the litter intelligence surveys. On this page, we've just got a few pictures of some really awesome surveys in different locations in Southland and on the West Coast. My slideshow isn't moving. Oh. There we go. So this was the title of my research, Analysing Coastal Litter in Southland. So I'm sure at this stage, everyone in the room is probably aware of the amazing work that Litter Intelligence is doing. But just as a recap for guests and online listeners, Litter Intelligence is part of the Sustainable Coastlines Initiative and is aiming to provide an in-depth picture of New Zealand's coastal litter problem through regular citizen science, volunteer-led surveys. One of the best aspects of Litter Intelligence in my eyes is that the volunteers do have the capacity to choose local survey sites which are special to them, maybe are easy to access on a regular basis, or that they believe would show a valuable or interesting aspect of the coastal litter story in their area. This results in an ongoing passion for place and provides regularity in the surveys, which is really, really important in citizen science to keep people interested and motivated to keep going. Going back to Southland, the coastal litter problem there is as bad as anywhere else in New Zealand. Contributions from industry, from beach users and litter washing up to shore pose risk to Southland's biodiversity, which with Fiordland National Park and Aotearoa National Park, as well as many other like hotspot coastal areas, is really essential. And the key industries of tourism, fishing and aquaculture in the region, which provide livelihood to people there, as well as coastal litter providing a general loss of recreation value in the region. And I can say from living there for a while, people love the beach and it's a really special part of living in the area. But it's really hard to create change on a large scale if you can't show data to either local government and the large industry players. And unfortunately, these groups often have concerns about the legitimacy of data collected by citizen science. Unfortunately, despite Litter Intelligence's data being used in national level environmental reporting already, and international studies showing that citizen science and coastal litter data is a really legitimate way of providing large-scale data over greater areas. So while designing the research, there were hopes that the data collected already by Litter Intelligence could be used in regional level environmental reporting. But we identified that the greatest compromise to the data was site selection, because sites are selected by volunteers who have a passion for place. This meant that potentially there are some biases towards more popular locations or sites that locals already know that there is more litter or particular litter in that location already. So I decided to survey, in my research, decided to survey randomized sites within the Southland region, and then to compare them to the existing litter intelligence data set to see if that bias is real in the site selection process, and also to see if there were any randomized sites or slightly more difficult to access sites that would provide a more detailed picture of Southland's litter picture. Yeah, more pictures from different locations. So humans are inherently terrible at doing things randomly, as much as we'd like to think that we are. And the harder that we try to do things randomly, the more likely we are to accidentally provide some sort of bias. So to randomly select the survey sites for the research, I isolated sections of the Southland coast which would be suitable for the research, i.e. easy to walk to get over on public land, and not have any dangerous features such as cliffs, which unfortunately happened before I improved the site selection process. And then within these isolated sections of the coast, I used a random select function on a computer mapping program, ArcGIS. And here on the screen, you can see the orange dots where the randomly selected sites were found. I decided to survey the equal amount of sites to the existing litter intelligence sites. So there were 13 sites already, and I selected an extra 13 sites throughout the region. I did decide to not survey in Fiordland National Park and Aotearoa National Park, simply for accessibility reasons, given I was undertaking this research on my own. How is the data collected? In the exact same way that litter intelligence surveys are undertaken. At low tide, I did the 100 metre by 10 to 20 metres along the high tide strand line, depending on the size of the beach. Picked up all of the litter, took it back, counted it, weighed it, sorted it into categories. And then once it was collected, I entered it into the Litter Intelligence open source online database as per usual, which then allowed me to download all of the data together from the existing litter intelligence surveys and the research-specific surveys, and analyze it both statistically and then also geographically in ArcGIS. So the part that we've all been waiting for, sorry if these images don't show up super well on a big screen. It's unfortunately one of the realities of Zoom presenting, but I will go through the categories to make it make more sense. So once the data was statistically analysed, it was shown overall that there was a greater weight and count of litter at the litter intelligence sites. However, the difference was determined to not be statistically significant. So basically what that means is that there was more litter, but not so much that it blew it out of the ballpark, which then made us believe that there was a small amount of site selection bias in the litter intelligence monitoring sites. However, overall, they are still a representative sample of Southland's litter picture. That's the overall view and the main answer to the question, but as anyone who's done research knows, there's answers within answers. Despite the total weight and count of the litter being similar, there were some key differences in the litter composition between the litter intelligence and the research sites. Primarily, litter intelligence sites had a greater count of glass and ceramic fragments, cigarette butts and food wrappers, all items which can be attributed to beachgoer influence. This potentially shows that if there is bias in the site selection process, it means that people are selecting sites that they find easier to access or might already be going to regularly. In the images that you can see on the screen, you can see on the left the top 10 most common litter items on Southland's coastline. By far the most common by count is unidentifiable hard plastic fragments, which makes a lot of sense as hard plastic items are washed up, and while they're in the ocean, they are disintegrating and becoming smaller pieces, potentially being broken up in rocks and waves and then washing up and being left on the shore. And similar with glass or ceramic fragments, there is a lot of rope found in the region, and that potentially comes down to things like fishing and agriculture. And then other litter items that were common were other metal, shotgun wadding and shells, unidentifiable soft plastic fragments, strapping, bands and tape, bottle caps and lids, and then other glass and ceramic. This looks quite different to the top 10 heaviest litter categories on Southland's coastline, which were found to be construction material, processed timber and pallet crates, rope, glass, ceramic fragments, bottles and jars, other woods, gardening and farming related items, other metal, unidentifiable metal fragments, and rubber footwear, specifically gumboots and jandals from what I saw. And this is pretty explainable by these items are often larger or carry more water weight at the end of the day. So delving into those categories by weight, comparing the research sites to the litter intelligence sites, it does look a little bit different. At the randomized research sites, you get more rope and other random bits of wood, but there is still a lot of construction material and processed timber. So somewhat similar, but there are also differences. So that there is that. And by count, sorry about that. There were some significant differences between the litter intelligence sites and the research sites, which I realize have swapped sides on the screen now, sorry about that. But at both sites, there was a very high quantity of the unidentifiable hard plastic fragments of the rope. And then at litter intelligence sites, there was again a higher proportion of the glass and ceramic fragments and higher quantities of metal and construction materials. So slightly different pictures being shown in the sites, but then also some similarities within those. Not shown on the screen, just some information that we found in the research, particularly going back to having high accounts of glass and ceramic fragments, cigarette butts and food wrappers. With the beachgoer influence, this could potentially also be linked back to less education about these issues within the region, and also high quantities of gardening and farming related items and shotgun wadding and strapping bands and tape. This could also be linked back to industry practices, which means litter is coming out from farms and this sort of thing. If we look at these individual litter categories and consider them as relevant, and we look at individual sites, we'll see that every site by itself and then combined shows that there is litter throughout the whole region, and they all provide significant insights to key locations within the region. Yeah, can talk more about that in questions. One of the more exciting results of the project, and probably one of the most enjoyable parts for me, was looking at all of this information more visually and looking at it geographically through the coastal litter maps created in ArcGIS, creating these kind of heat bubble maps where in the top one you can see the quantity of, quantity of litter by weight, and at the bottom by count, and you can see in certain locations there is more litter. You can see that a lot of sites have high density of litter by weight, and then others have less. And it's just giving us understanding that there is different different aspects to the picture throughout the whole region, and we can't treat it as one fix for the whole region, and there might be different answers throughout that. Unfortunately, that was something that I didn't delve into with the research. Something good that I noticed through the literature review and reviewing international research is that the composition of the litter collected throughout the region is really comparable to international surveys. So we're not finding massively different things here, which also means that international solutions that are applied to coastal litter potentially could be applicable in Southland and the whole of Aotearoa. Going into next steps, unfortunately, there were some holdups in getting the research and the litter intelligence data to be reported on at a regional level. However, I believe that Environment Southland, the regional council, absolutely has capacity for this, and it could really provide some great motivation for people in the region to be doing more about litter there, specifically the litter that's being dropped by beachgoers and industry players and that sort of thing. And yeah, hopefully there's more research done by Southland Institute of Technology with some really passionate students down there. And I think overall it showed that the continuation of the litter intelligence surveys in the region is really, really important, because it is showing valuable information for what's happening on the coastlines there, and shown that it is reliable data when it's taken regularly and shown for lots of different places. And it's also shown that these places that the volunteers are passionate about are showing really good information, and those sites can be revisited and continued to be surveyed. So basically from here in the research project, I did complete the thesis and a poster and did the presentations, which was really great to happen. So if anyone is interested in that further, be more than happy to talk about that. Yeah, thank you for listening. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Kia ora. Thank you, Kelly. Are there any questions for Kelly along with on Zoom? If anyone's got any questions.
In regards to the front of it, we should talk about road. I'm assuming it's synthetic road.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, awesome. So we've got a question from Carla G. So she was wondering how you've said the plastic that you found, which was rope, just wondering if it was synthetic rope or if it also included like natural cotton rope or like jute or anything.
Yeah, that's a great question. There are different categories within the audit part of the survey where pretty much what happens is you divide the categories up by essentially the class or what the item is made of. So that might be plastic, metal, fabric, etc. So rope is split up into fabric or textile rope and then synthetic rope. I'm not 100% sure why I didn't specify that in those images, but I'm pretty sure off the top of my head that that would be synthetic plastic rope, and that can be anything from big, thick ropes, and in some remote locations we found up to potentially like 500 kilograms worth of rope in one spot of really thick rope, to really small shards of what you can tell is synthetic rope or that kind of thing. Yeah, but litter intelligence methodology doesn't just survey the plastic, it also surveys all litter that is on the beach.
Awesome. Ursula,
From two perspectives, from user, like a user from the litter intelligence survey, and from the research perspective, is anything that you would change or improve in the survey?
so there was just a question from Ursula. So when it's to do with the litter intelligence survey compared to the user or the research
So you have
proposal.
two point of view
So there's 2 point of views between the user
and the research.
and the research. Is there anything that you would change when redesigning the study? Is that it?
No, the survey.
The survey.
itself.
The actual survey.
Do you mean the litter intelligence survey methodology?
Yeah.
Not at all. I think because the program is already so widespread and we've got such a solid backing of data already, which you can see on the litter intelligence open source website, at this point to have the continuity of the data set, and we've already got such a great background of dedicated citizen science volunteers who know the process inside and out. At this stage, no, I think it's not worth changing it at all. And it works and you get reliable data. And another side of that is that the litter intelligence methodology is actually based off of the United Nations Environment Programme guidelines for coastal litter monitoring. And I think they've got a pretty reliable method that we've kind of adapted for the New Zealand environment and citizen science capabilities.
Emma's got a question.
Kia ora, Kelly. It's Emma from Sustainable Coastlines. First of all, I just want to say a massive thank you for all your hard work on litter intelligence and for representing the program so well. So thank you for coming to the conference. One question I had was on action. So you mentioned contacting the regional council and getting them involved with litter intelligence or using the data. Do you have any other ideas for action in terms of contacting? There is quite a lot of farming and construction related litter. Do you have any kind of hopes for engaging other players that may have brought the litter to the coastline in terms of action?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. If I had the time and space in my life to go and talk to every farmer individually, I would love to. I think it's a little bit, this is 100% from my perspective. I can't back this up to any legitimate research or anything like this. 100% from my perspective. It's kind of a tricky thing, initially being from someone who isn't from the Southland region and from someone who lived in the urban environment in the Southland region, to be approaching people within industry, especially as individuals, and telling them like, look, what you're doing is polluting the environment and you should stop. Because I think there's a lot of pressure on farmers across a suite of environmental issues that already there's so many things piling up on them that to add on that directly and to potentially have the perspective of blame on that is the worst possible thing that we can be doing. And if that were to happen, I think it would be best to approach farming groups or potentially catchment groups, approaching something like young farmers, and to get the word out that way. But in saying that, I know there are also a lot of farmers in the region who are wildly passionate about the environment. They know that it's there to look after, and so I think it could go down well if it's done correctly and if we have the right people on board who know how to communicate the issues well.